The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under the light of 3 suns. Inside, representatives from over 200 advanced civilizations gathered for an emergency session. The chamber buzzed with worried whispers and frightened clicks from various species. At the center of the room, a hologram displayed the greatest threat the galaxy had faced in 10,000 years. A massive cluster of asteroids, each the size of a small moon, hurtling through space toward the most populated sector of the galaxy. High Counselor Reed, a tall being with silver skin, raised all 4 of his arms for silence. The chamber grew quiet except for the soft hum of translation devices. "The situation is grave," Reed announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our best calculations show the asteroid cluster will impact 5 inhabited systems within the next 6 months. The combined death toll would be in the billions." The chief scientist of the Stellar Federation, Dr. Blue, stepped forward. His crystalline body reflected fragments of light as he moved. "We have analyzed every possible solution. The size and speed of the cluster make it impossible to deflect with our current technology. The gravitational interactions between the asteroids are too complex for our most advanced computers to model accurately." Murmurs of despair spread through the chamber. The Galactic Council represented the most advanced species in known space. If they couldn't solve this problem, no one could. Then a voice called out from the back of the chamber, "We might have a solution." All eyes turned to see a human standing up from his seat in the observer section. The Earth delegation had only joined the Galactic Council 3 months ago, and many members still viewed them as primitive newcomers. The human wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's Space Force. His name badge read Captain Miller. He stood straight and confident, despite the dismissive looks from the other representatives. High Counselor Reed's expression showed a mix of annoyance and amusement. "Captain Miller, while we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, this crisis is beyond even our most advanced civilizations. Your species has barely achieved faster than light travel." Miller walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the now silent chamber. "With respect, High Counselor, sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what's needed. We humans have experience with asteroid deflection, albeit on a smaller scale." Dr. Blue's crystalline form flickered with what might have been laughter. "Your species has barely deflected a few small rocks in your own system. This cluster contains 47 asteroids, each massive enough to destroy a planet. The gravitational mathematics alone would take 1,000 years to calculate." Miller reached the center of the chamber and stood beside the hologram. "We've run some initial calculations. We believe a combination of synchronized nuclear detonations and gravitational slingshot effects could work." The chamber erupted in dismissive chatter. Nuclear weapons were considered primitive and dangerous by most advanced species, who had long since developed more elegant solutions to their problems. "Nuclear weapons," a representative from the Technology Alliance scoffed. "Next, you'll suggest we throw rocks at it." Miller remained calm despite the mockery. "Sometimes the old ways work best. We've developed a preliminary plan that—" "Enough," High Counselor Reed interrupted. "Captain, while we appreciate Earth's willingness to help, this is not the time for primitive solutions. The Council needs to focus on realistic options." "But," Miller started, "this session will adjourn for 1 hour while our top scientists consider other approaches," Reed announced. "Captain Miller, please return to the observer section." As Miller walked back to his seat, he pulled out his communication device and sent a quick message to Earth. "Council dismissive. Proceeding with Plan B." The response came back almost instantly. "Understood. Team assembled. Beginning preparations." Miller smiled slightly as he sat down. The Council might not believe in humanity's abilities, but that had never stopped humans before. As the other representatives filed out of the chamber for their break, he looked up at the hologram of the asteroid cluster. Where others saw an impossible problem, he saw a challenge. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was beating impossible odds. He knew what the other species didn't. Back on Earth, A team of the planet's best scientists and engineers was already working on the problem. They would solve this crisis, with or without the Council's approval, because that's what humans did best. They found a way, even when everyone else said it couldn't be done. The underground facility beneath Earth's Mojave Desert hummed with activity. In a large circular room filled with holographic displays, Captain Miller's message flashed on the main screen. Council dismissive. Proceeding with Plan B. Dr. Robert Stone looked up from his calculations and adjusted his old-fashioned glasses. Unlike most scientists who used neural interfaces, he preferred the simple tools that had served humanity for centuries. Around him, dozens of screens showed simulations of the asteroid cluster's movement. They dismissed us, didn't they? Engineer Tom Cooper asked, his weathered face breaking into a knowing smile. He had spent 20 years in asteroid mining before joining this project, just like everyone said they would. Of course they did, Dr. Anna Williams replied, her fingers dancing over a holographic keyboard. She was running new calculations based on the latest data from Earth's deep space telescopes. We're too primitive for their tastes. The room, officially called the Emergency Response Center, but nicknamed the bunker by its occupants, contained humanity's best hope for saving billions of lives. While the Galactic Council debated elegant solutions, this team of 50 humans worked tirelessly on their own plan. Miller's face appeared on the main screen. What's our status? The initial simulations are promising, Dr. Stone reported, pulling up a complex series of equations. We've identified weak points in the asteroid cluster's formation. If we hit them in the right sequence, we can use the gravitational interactions to our advantage. Cooper stepped forward, pointing to a 3D model of the largest asteroid. The mining charges are ready. We've modified them based on our experience with lunar mining operations. These aren't just simple explosives. They're precision tools designed to crack these rocks exactly where we want them. The Council thinks we're just suggesting brute force, Dr. Williams added with a slight smirk. They don't understand that we've been studying asteroid deflection since we first realized they could threaten Earth. We may not have their advanced technology, but we have something they don't. Centuries of practical experience dealing with similar problems on a smaller scale. Miller nodded on the screen. How soon can we be ready for a test? Give us 48 hours, Cooper replied. We need to load the equipment onto the ships and run final checks on the nuclear devices. The word nuclear made several team members smile. The Council races had long since abandoned such primitive technology in favor of more sophisticated energy sources. But humans knew sometimes the old ways worked best, especially when combined with new innovations. I've completed the gravitational calculations, Dr. Williams announced. The Council races are overthinking it. Yes, the asteroid cluster's movements are complex, but they follow basic physical laws. We don't need thousand-year calculations. We just need to understand the fundamental patterns. Dr. Stone walked to the center of the room, where a hologram showed the asteroid cluster's path. The key isn't trying to move the whole cluster at once. We start with these 3 smaller asteroids on the outer edge. Their gravitational influence on the others is minimal. Once we break them up, it creates a cascade effect we can use to our advantage. Like playing pool with planets, Cooper added. You don't hit all the balls at once. You plan your shots carefully. Miller's expression grew serious. The Council won't sanction this. We'll have to move fast and prove it works before they can stop us. Then we better not fail, Dr. Williams said, her voice firm. Because if we do, they'll never let humanity try to solve a major crisis again. The team looked at each other, determination clear in their eyes. They knew the stakes, not just billions of lives, but humanity's chance to prove itself to the galaxy. They had 48 hours to prepare for their first test, and failure wasn't an option. Cooper summed up what everyone was thinking. Let them doubt us. Humans have always done their best work when everyone else said it was impossible. As the team returned to their tasks with renewed energy, the screens around them displayed the countdown. 47:59, 43, and ticking. The race to save the galaxy had begun, whether the Council approved or not. The test site was an uninhabited system at the edge of Council space. 3 Earth ships hung in the darkness, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight. They were small compared to the massive Council vessels, but what they lacked in size, they made up for in purpose. All ships report ready. Cooper's voice crackled over the comm system. He commanded the mining vessel Digger, loaded with specially modified charges. We've got one shot at this before the Council realizes what we're doing. Dr. Williams, aboard the science vessel Newton, studied the readings from their target, a small asteroid about 1/10 the size of those in the threatening cluster. Initial scans complete. The composition matches our predictions. This will be a perfect test subject. Captain Miller watched from the command ship Pioneer. The Council had given humanity permission to conduct routine exercises in this system. They wouldn't know the truth until it was too late to stop them. Begin Phase 1, Miller ordered. The Digger moved forward, approaching the asteroid with the precision that came from decades of mining experience. Cooper's team had done this hundreds of times in Earth's asteroid belt, though never quite on this scale. Placing charges at designated points, Cooper reported. Just like cracking open a walnut, you just need to know where to hit it. Dr. Stone's voice joined the conversation from his station on the Newton. The Council thinks we're being crude, using explosives and nuclear devices. They don't understand that each charge is precisely calculated. This isn't brute force. It's more like surgery. As Cooper's team worked, Dr. Williams made a surprising discovery. Captain, I'm detecting a pattern in the asteroid's internal structure. It's similar to what we see in the larger cluster. The Council's scientists missed it because they were looking for complex solutions instead of basic geological patterns. Explain, Miller said, leaning forward in his chair. These space rocks aren't random, Williams continued, excitement creeping into her voice. They follow natural fault lines, just like rocks on Earth. The Council races have been spacefaring so long, they've forgotten some fundamental principles of planetary geology. The information brought a smile to Miller's face. Sometimes the oldest knowledge proved the most valuable. Charges placed, Cooper announced, returning to safe distance. The next hour was a blur of activity as the 3 ships moved into position. Each nuclear device had to be placed with perfect precision. The Council races would have used energy beams or gravity manipulators, but humanity's primitive nuclear weapons would provide exactly the right amount of force needed. All ships at safe distance, Miller announced. Final checks. Newton ready, Williams reported. All sensors recording. Digger ready, Cooper added. Charges armed and synchronized. Miller took a deep breath. This moment would either prove humanity's worth to the galaxy or confirm every doubt the Council had about them. Begin countdown sequence. Numbers flashed on every screen. 10, 9, 8. If this works, Dr. Stone said quietly, we'll have proved that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. 3, 2, 1. Initiate detonation sequence, Miller ordered. The first explosion was precisely calculated, striking a natural fault line in the asteroid. The second followed milliseconds later, then the third. To an outside observer, it might have looked like random destruction, but every blast was carefully planned. The asteroid began to crack along its natural seams, breaking apart exactly as the team had predicted. The fragments moved outward in a controlled pattern, guided by the precise force of the explosions. It's working, Williams exclaimed. The fragment trajectories match our calculations perfectly. But before they could celebrate, alarms blared across all 3 ships. On their long-range sensors, a Council vessel appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Well, Miller said, straightening his uniform, looks like we'll be explaining ourselves sooner than planned. But at least now we have proof that our method works. The Council ship grew larger on their screens, but none of the humans felt worried. They had done what everyone said was impossible. Now they just had to convince the galaxy's most advanced civilizations that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected places. The Council ship's holographic transmission filled the Pioneer's bridge. High Counselor Reed's silver face showed a mix of anger and disbelief as he stared at the human crew. Captain Miller. Reed's voice was cold. You have conducted an unauthorized weapons test in Council space. Explain yourself immediately. Miller stood straight, his calm demeanor unchanged. Not a weapons test, Counselor. A demonstration of our solution to the asteroid crisis. The debris field of the perfectly split asteroid floated behind them, exactly as they had planned. Each fragment was already moving along its calculated trajectory. We detected nuclear detonations, Reed said. Your species was explicitly forbidden from bringing such primitive weapons into Council space. Dr. Williams stepped forward. With respect, Counselor, look at the sensor readings. Every fragment is following a controlled path. This wasn't destruction. It was precision engineering. The Council ship's own sensors confirmed her words. The asteroid hadn't been destroyed randomly. It had been split along its natural fault lines into predictable, manageable pieces. Dr. Stone transmitted their data. We discovered something your scientists missed. These asteroids follow basic geological patterns, the same patterns we studied on Earth for centuries. The silence that followed was broken by a new voice. Dr. Blue, the Council's chief scientist, appeared beside Reed in the hologram. His crystalline form sparkled as he studied the data. Impossible, he muttered. The calculations should have taken years. Only if you try to account for every possible variable, Cooper interrupted. He pulled up the mining charts. We used Earth's old mining techniques. Sometimes the simple solution works better than the complex one. More Council scientists joined the transmission, their faces showing a range of emotions from skepticism to growing interest. The evidence was right in front of them. The humans had succeeded where their advanced calculations had failed. This was a small asteroid, Reed argued. The threatening cluster is thousands of times larger. True, Miller agreed. But the principle is the same. We're not trying to destroy the cluster. We're going to split it along its natural fault lines, then redirect the pieces using synchronized nuclear detonations and gravitational effects. Dr. Blue's crystalline form flickered rapidly, a sign of intense thought. The energy requirements would be enormous. That's why we're using nuclear devices, Dr. Williams explained. Your energy beams are more elegant, but they lack the raw force we need. Sometimes you need a hammer, not a scalpel. A new alarm sounded. The long-range sensors showed the first asteroids from the deadly cluster were now only 3 weeks from the nearest inhabited system. We don't have time for lengthy debates, Miller said firmly. The test worked. Every piece of that asteroid went exactly where we predicted. We can scale up the operation, but we need the Council's help to do it in time. The Council members conferred in their own language, their discussion heated. Finally, Reed turned back to the humans. Your actions were reckless and unauthorized. He began, then paused. But, effective. Dr. Blue, what is your analysis? The crystalline scientists studied the data one more time. Their method is crude, but the results are undeniable. The fragments followed the predicted paths with 99.7% accuracy. That's better than our best simulations. Reed looked at Miller for a long moment. You risked severe punishment by conducting this test without permission. We risked punishment to save lives, Miller replied. That's what humans do. The High Counselor's expression slowly changed. Perhaps we have underestimated your species. Dr. Blue, assemble a team. Captain Miller, we will need your complete data and plan immediately. The humans shared quick smiles. They had done it, convinced the Council to listen, but there was no time to celebrate. The real work was just beginning, and they had 3 weeks to save billions of lives. Let's show them what humanity can really do, Miller said to his crew. The next phase would be harder, but now they had something they didn't have before: the Council's respect, however grudgingly given. A fleet of ships surrounded the approaching asteroid cluster. Council vessels dwarfed the human ships, their sleek designs contrasting with the practical Earth vessels. The first inhabited system was visible in the distance, 3 planets circling a red dwarf star, home to over 4 billion beings. Inside the command center of the Pioneer, screens showed countdown timers. 72 hours until impact with the first system. All ships report ready, Cooper announced from the digger. His crew had worked non-stop with Council engineers to modify their mining charges. The result was a hybrid of human ingenuity and alien technology. Dr. Williams studied the final calculations on the Newton. The Council's quantum computers confirm our numbers. Each detonation must be precise to the millisecond. Captain Miller looked at the massive view screen showing the approaching asteroid cluster. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. 47 dark masses moving through space like a school of deadly fish. The Council evacuation ships are in position, Dr. Stone reported, but they can only move a fraction of the population in time. If we fail, Miller cut him off. We won't fail. Begin Phase 1. The digger moved forward, now accompanied by 3 Council mining ships. They had to place hundreds of charges across the surface of the largest asteroids. It was like their test run, but 1,000 times more complex. First charges placed, Cooper reported. His voice was tense but steady. Moving to second position. Suddenly, alarms blared across all ships. Dr. Williams' hands flew across her controls. The cluster's rotation is increasing. The gravitational interactions are stronger than we predicted. The models didn't show this. Dr. Blue's crystalline form flickered with concern on the communication screen. The time to impact is decreasing. Miller watched as the countdown timers adjusted. 48 hours until impact. We need more time, one of the Council commanders said. We must recalculate. No, Miller interrupted. We stick to the plan. Cooper, continue placing charges. Dr. Blue, have your ships ready with the gravity projectors. Dr. Williams, adjust our detonation sequence for the new rotation speed. But the risk. Dr. Blue began. The risk of doing nothing is worse, Miller said firmly. This is what humans do best, adapt and overcome. The next 40 hours were a blur of activity. Cooper's teams worked tirelessly, placing charges while dodging debris and dealing with the increasing gravitational forces. The Council ships' advanced shields protected them as they worked. Final charges placed, Cooper reported, his voice exhausted but triumphant. All ships returning to safe distance. Dr. Williams made the final adjustments to their calculations. The sequence is updated. If this works, the fragments will miss the inhabited system by millions of kilometers. And if it doesn't? Dr. Blue asked. Then we'll be too dead to worry about it, Cooper replied grimly. Miller took a deep breath. Everything rested on the next few moments. All ships confirm ready status. One by one, the ships reported in. Human and Council vessels working together, their differences forgotten in the face of catastrophe. Begin detonation sequence, Miller ordered. The first explosion was invisible in the vacuum of space, but its effect was immediate. A crack appeared in the largest asteroid, following the natural fault line Dr. Williams had identified. The second charge detonated milliseconds later, then the third. It's working, Dr. Stone shouted. The fracture patterns match our predictions. But something was wrong. The fourth asteroid in the sequence began to break apart too quickly, its fragments threatening to spiral out of control. The gravitational forces are cascading, Dr. Blue warned. The pattern is collapsing. Miller's voice cut through the chaos. This is what we planned for. Cooper, initiate secondary charges. Council ships, full power to gravity projectors. Dr. Williams, start the emergency sequence. As alarms blared and screens flashed warning signals, the combined human and alien fleet raced to prevent disaster. They had one chance to get this right, and failure meant billions of deaths. The next few minutes would decide everything. Chaos erupted across the command screens as the asteroid cluster began breaking apart in unexpected ways. Fragment after fragment spun off in dangerous patterns, threatening to create a deadly shower of rocks instead of the controlled split they had planned. "Gravity readings are off the scale," Dr. Williams shouted from the Newton. "The interaction between the fragments is creating a cascade effect." On the main view screen, the largest asteroids were splitting, but not along their planned fault lines. The Council ship's gravity projectors strained to control the chaos, their advanced technology pushed to its limits. "The Council ships can't hold it." Dr. Blue's normally calm voice showed panic. "Our gravity projectors are failing." That's when Captain Miller saw something everyone else had missed. "Look at the pattern," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Dr. Williams, the fragments aren't moving randomly. They're following a new gravitational dance." Dr. Williams' fingers flew across her controls. "He's right. The fragments are creating their own gravitational field. It's like a river finding a new path." "Then we don't fight it," Cooper called from the digger. "We ride it, just like riding the currents in asteroid mining." Miller nodded. This was what humans did best, adapting when plans went wrong. "Dr. Blue, have your ships pull back their gravity projectors. Don't try to force the fragments back to our original plan." "Pull back." Dr. Blue's crystalline form flickered in alarm. "The fragments will spiral completely out of control." "Trust us," Miller said firmly. "Dr. Stone, show them." Dr. Stone had already spotted what Miller saw. He transmitted new calculations to all ships. "The fragments are creating their own gravitational highway. If we redirect our remaining charges to these key points." He highlighted several spots on the display. "Cooper, can you place charges at those exact locations?" Miller asked. "In this chaos, it'll be like threading a needle in a hurricane." Cooper paused. "Give me 20 minutes. "You have 10, Miller replied. The next 10 minutes were a masterclass in human adaptability. While the Council ships held back, Cooper's team navigated through the swirling debris. They placed their remaining charges with incredible precision, using the very chaos around them to reach spots that should have been impossible to access. "Final charge placed," Cooper announced as the digger pulled back. "Ready on your mark." Miller looked at Dr. Williams. "Will this work?" She double-checked her calculations. "The math says yes, but it's not like anything we've ever tried before. We're basically creating a gravitational slingshot using the fragment's own momentum." "Sometimes you have to improvise," Miller said. "All ships, clear the blast zone. Initiating final detonation sequence in 3, 2, 1. The remaining charges detonated in perfect sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a gigantic game of cosmic billiards, the fragments began to move. The gravitational forces they had feared turned into their ally, pulling the larger pieces into a new pattern. "It's working," Dr. Stone shouted. "The fragments are falling into the new trajectory." On every screen, the deadly asteroid fragments that had threatened billions of lives were now moving away from the inhabited system, pulled along a new gravitational path that would carry them safely into deep space. Dr. Blue's voice was filled with awe. "Remarkable. You didn't just solve the problem. You turned the problem into the solution." The Council ship's sensors confirmed what everyone could see. The crisis was over. The inhabited system was safe. "That," Cooper said with a tired grin, "is why you should never tell humans something is impossible. We'll just figure out a different way to do it." The combined fleet watched as the last fragments moved past them, now nothing more than a spectacular light show instead of a deadly threat. They had done it, not by following the original plan, but by adapting when that plan failed. "Captain Miller," Dr. Blue's voice was different now, respectful. "I believe we owe your species an apology. And our thanks." Miller smiled. "No apology needed, Doctor. Just remember, sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. It's the one that works." 1 month after the asteroid crisis, the Great Chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different. The human delegation no longer sat in the observer section. Instead, they occupied a prominent position near the center, their new status as full council members reflected in their location. Captain Miller stood at the main podium, finishing his presentation on the events that had saved billions of lives. Behind him, a hologram showed the fragments of the asteroid cluster, now safely dispersed into deep space, their paths tracked by both human and council vessels. In conclusion, Miller said, the success of this mission wasn't just about human ingenuity or council technology. It was about learning to combine both, to take the best of the old and the new, the simple and the advanced. High Counselor Reed rose from his seat, his silver skin gleaming. Captain Miller, your species has taught us a valuable lesson. We have become so focused on elegant solutions that we forgot sometimes the simplest answer is the best one. Dr. Williams, now heading the Joint Human Council scientific team, stepped forward. We've already begun applying this combined approach to other problems. The Council's advanced computers working together with human practical experience have solved 3 other impossible problems in the past month alone. From his new position as co-chair of the Council's engineering division, Cooper added, and my mining crews are teaching Council engineers how to think creatively when technology alone isn't enough. Turns out there's a lot to learn from what they called our primitive methods. Dr. Blue's crystalline form sparkled with enthusiasm. The combination of human adaptability and our advanced technology has opened up possibilities we never imagined. Dr. Stone's team has developed a new type of gravitational mathematics that combines council theoretical models with human practical applications. The chamber, once filled with dismissive whispers about humans, now buzzed with excitement about the future. Species that had looked down on humanity just months ago were now eagerly seeking human partners for joint projects. But perhaps the most important lesson, Miller continued, wasn't about technology or problem-solving at all. It was about perspective. Every species in this council brings something unique to the galaxy. Progress isn't just about having the most advanced technology. It's about being willing to look at problems from new angles. High Counselor Reed nodded, which is why we are announcing today the formation of the Council's new Crisis Response Division, to be jointly led by human and council representatives. Captain Miller has agreed to serve as its first director. The chamber erupted in approving sounds from various species. Miller looked at his team, remembering how just months ago they had stood in this same chamber, dismissed as primitives. Now they were respected equals, their primitive solutions recognized as valuable contributions to galactic civilization. And what about the remaining fragments? A representative asked. Dr. Williams smiled. Actually, we've turned them into an opportunity. Cooper's teams are using them to teach advanced mining techniques, while council scientists study the gravitational patterns we discovered. What was once a threat has become a teaching tool. That, Dr. Blue added, is perhaps the most human thing of all, turning problems into opportunities. As the session concluded, Miller looked around the chamber. The barriers between advanced and primitive species had broken down. Council ships now carried human-style backup systems alongside their advanced technology. Human ships were being upgraded with council innovations. The galaxy was stronger for having both. You know what the best part is? Cooper said quietly to Miller as they left the chamber. They're not just accepting our help, they're learning to think like us. The next time someone says something's impossible, they might just try it anyway. Miller smiled. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had played a key role in that change. Not by being the most advanced, but by remembering something the council had forgotten. Sometimes the old ways still worked best, and no problem was truly impossible if you were willing to try new approaches. As they walked out under the light of 3 suns, Miller thought about how far they'd come. The humans who had once been doubted were now teaching the galaxy's most advanced civilizations that progress wasn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it was about remembering where you came from and bringing the best of the past into the future.